Hello everybody and welcome to Cabaret Secrets. My name's Gary Williams and today I'm joined by Sarah Cluderay. Your work ranges from sort of opera and rarefied choral work to the bawdy world of cabaret. There's quite a big crossover there, isn't there?
There is. I think it's partly because I trained as a classical singer and I love that, and as you said, I do a lot of choral stuff, a lot of sacred choral works and religious services and stuff. So the cabaret stuff is my chance to let my hair down, I think, really. I've got to get my fix.
So you have a cabaret show, a partnership. Tell me about that.
Okay, we have a cabaret duo called Two Dumb Blondes, and it's two soprano divas, as we like to call ourselves. Obviously, all sopranos do. She's also a blonde lady, of course. We both have a real love of cabaret. She describes herself as a crossover soprano. The way we bill ourselves as two dumb blondes, obviously that's ironic because, of course, we're extremely intelligent.
Of course.
We're kind of like opera done in a carry-on style. That's probably the best way to say it.
I love that. I love the sound of that. Is it serious music but done in a fun way, or how do you choose the repertoire for that?
It's a combination. We do have some serious opera songs and duets in there, but we've also got quite a few versions where we've changed the lyrics. And I mean, actually, what we've discovered is trying to make, for example, a Mozart duet a bit saucy. It already is. We just have to ever so slightly change one word here or there from the translation, translate it out of the Italian, change the odd word, and straight away it's all filth.
What makes a good cabaret show? It's the difference between a set and a show, in that a set being just hit songs, one song after another, great songs, you know, keep everybody happy and clapping their hands or singing along. And a show is something more with a bit of craft to it, with a beginning, middle and an end, and where the chat and what you say is probably just as important, sometimes more important than the songs that you sing. How is the show that you do in relation to that?
I think that's something we wanted to really add in. If you think about it, in a classical concert, for example, it would literally be that same thing of standing there singing all the songs and everybody claps and it's lovely, but it's not got a story, it's not got stories to tell. Even if we don't have a storyline arc, what we put in our show was a theme that links it together, which was basically, we did it as a how-to guide, how to be a soprano diva from start to finish, including starting with the training. But we told a few personal stories ourselves about how we started. Going through, we got the audience doing a bit of audience participation with the vocal warm-ups, which is always goes down very well, and then going on to stories of our tours and things, because you know the saying, what goes on tour stays on tour. Well, we had a few stories that we revealed, and I think that's what makes it more interesting, as you say, and it means we can connect with the audience. You're breaking the fourth wall. I mean, obviously in lots of cabaret, quite literally jumping down off the stage and jumping onto somebody's lap, you know, which is something that happens in our show. But we want to be able to see the audience's faces. There are things that will happen in the show that you can't rehearse for. You might say something and then somebody will shout out a comment. In fact, that happened at our show. I told a dirty joke and said, oh, I'd better not tell this. My dad's in the audience. And when I started telling the joke, my dad shouted from the back, I told you that. And it was only then that I realised he was the one who'd originally told me the joke.
But brilliant, right? Those moments are fantastic, aren't they? So do you think, in trying to define cabaret, because you know that the book, Cabaret Secrets, and one of the things that I really struggled with in the book was defining cabaret, trying to, you know, what is it that I'm actually talking about in this book? And I found it really hard to define. And some of the things that you're talking about, connecting with the audience, breaking down the fourth wall, chatting to them, these seem to be some of the things that describe cabaret. How would you define it? What is cabaret?
I think it's a combination of those things that you've said, but it's a creativity, it's an opportunity for artists to do something very different and very interesting and see what happens, I think, because there's so many things in a cabaret show. If you think of the old variety shows or the revues where there were lots of different acts, and obviously there are nights where that still happens, all these different things are happening. So if you've got your own cabaret show, you can really push the limits and do all sorts of different things.
And you spend some of your time now reviewing cabaret shows.
I do. That's been a very interesting experience for me because it's the opportunity to see so many different types of artists. and get an overview. So think about the way people have decided to stage their show, or all the things you've talked about, like how are they chatting to the audience, all these little elements. And I find it very interesting, and, you know, haven't got the money to always go to every single show out there. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to see more artists.
How long have you been reviewing, and how many shows do you reckon you've seen over the last few years?
I've only really been reviewing for about a year. I've seen probably about 10 shows as a reviewer, and it makes you watch it in a slightly different way.
So,
Yeah, you know what? I know the remit I've got to do, and I don't think you're not supposed to write a review to say what you think the show should have been, because you're writing a review of the show that you are watching.
Right.
And I always try not to compare them too much to somebody else, to another artist, because I was always taught when I was training as a singer, you are yourself. You're not trying to be somebody else. So I think those are the elements I try and have in my head while I'm watching. I try and just write down some notes as I'm watching, just to remind me of things that stand out for me, whether that's good or bad. And when I say bad, it's hard to say that, because you don't want to be hugely negative, or that was bad or that was wrong. That's not the sense that I mean. But I want to be entertained, and I try and sit there as an audience member as much as I can, even though sometimes that's hard, because you might have been placed in a particular seat by the management, and you think, do they know I'm here? In some cases, it's obvious that you know you're in the reviewer's seat, and you feel like, are they playing to me slightly? I would far rather hide out at the back and be able to be more a member of the audience and see, was I entertained? And I think that's what hopefully the audience members are going there for as well.
You seem like a nice person, and but I know some reviewers write some quite unpleasant things, some quite tough things. I mean, how do you cope with that if you see something that's really does need a lot of work, that's really not very good, that you weren't entertained by, and neither were the audience? How do you deal with that?
There's a couple of problems, I think, when that happens, because one instance I had, I won't name any names obviously, but it was a new act, and they actually announced it was their first show, and in my opinion the pianist wasn't very good. I thought the singer was great, but the pianist just wasn't good enough. And I think I chickened out of saying that. Maybe I think some of the other reviews that you're mentioning might possibly have written, but I wanted to say that I thought she needs to get somebody else to play, but in the end I just didn't mention the pianist at all, and I thought perhaps if I just do it that way instead, it might be a bit, but maybe that's because I'm a bit too nice.
If every review that you write is nice and glowing, then people are going to stop taking you too seriously, aren't they?
That's true, and I think, for example, there's a couple of things that I've seen that are review shows that possibly my act might have been, you know, a possible act for down the line, or sometimes it actually has been the case that they were interested in having my act at a future show. I'm there reviewing it, and I've made the choice to not write a sycophantic review. If I don't get the gig as a result of that, I would far rather, and that's something that's happened. So.
That's really tricky, isn't it? So you're working with these people, or potentially going to be working with these people that you might be slagging off in a review. It's a really tricky position for you, because most reviewers, they're just going to review and then disappear, and that's that, right? Disappear into cyberspace.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the implication or the idea that reviewers are either failed performers or ex-performers or whatever. Whether that's true, I don't know, but as I am a working performer, then maybe sometimes somebody's nose might get out of joint. But I don't want to sit there as though entertain me is a challenge that you think the performer's going to fail at. And I think some reviewers, judging by what they've written, that seems to be them sitting there, just as they say about audition panels. Really, an audition panelist is supposed to want you to be good. They're not supposed to sit there going, right, you know, impress me.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you find that sometimes you're sitting watching a performance and you think, this is terrible, this is awful, but everyone around you's eating it up?
That has happened fairly recently in a show I reviewed, and the audience really seemed to love it. And I did write that in the review. I often do that. I will mention, if there's a good audience response, I'll mention it. But at the end of the day, it's my opinion. If I think that particular part of the show wasn't working, I'm going to say why I think it wasn't working. But I'm still going to say that the audience enjoyed it, because that was true. If where on the other hand, if obviously if the audience were on the same side as me and it all felt really uncomfortable, then I would write that as well.
What things have you learned from seeing so many other shows and reviewing them critically? What things have you taken away from that to improve your own performances?
I think one of the things I've taken away is about pacing, the pacing of a show, especially with the chat in between songs. Because when I've watched a show that hasn't quite got that quick pace, I don't mean it has to be quick fire the whole time, but you want it to be snappy. You don't want people to be sitting there a little bit bored waiting for the next song. And I think that's something I've really tried to work on with my show, or our show that we do, because I've seen shows that it's just suddenly stopped. Or even, not necessarily the chat, the order that they've arranged the songs in, which I know is something in your book that you've gone into in great detail about, you know, the beginning, middle and an end. If you're thinking about, if there's, for example, on a basic level, if there's too many slow songs, one after the other, the pace of the show is going to drop. There might be a reason artistically why they've decided to do that, but it's got to be a really good reason, otherwise there is a little bit of boredom setting in. So I've tried to take that and apply it to the shows that I do.
What common mistakes do you see in other people's shows?
I think things going on too long, whether it's a sketch or a show in full.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, maybe I'm just obsessed with pace. And I'm thinking, let's make it snappy the whole time. When I'm saying this now, I'm thinking, yeah, that seems to me the most common mistake, is to just, it keeps going on a bit in whatever way.
And what about for those performers, me being one of them, that often is doing a show and wants to get somebody along to review it? It seems hard to get your show reviewed. First of all, because there aren't that many places that are interested in reviewing cabaret shows, have the space or the time to do it. And secondly, those few people that are out there are lots of shows, so those few people that are left are in great demand. What tips can you give people listening to, if they want to get you or somebody else, you know, along to review a show? What's the best approach?
I think what can happen with cabaret, as you said, about the fact that there's, you know, not that many publications out there that do review, they're spread very thin, and a lot of cabaret shows might only be on for one night, and sometimes it's hard for them to justify sending a reviewer to a show that's only running for that one night. So I think that can be one of the reasons. So if there's any way that perhaps an artist can send a few dates along with their press release, so that then after the review is written and published, they can say, and this, you can catch this artist at this date and this date and this date coming up.
Is there a resource of publications that's easy to access online, or is it a matter of just trawling through and trying to find the different ones?
Well, I write some reviews for This Is Cabaret, and I know that they review all sorts of different types of productions, and they've also got different specialisms within their reviews. They have someone that specialises in circus, for example, someone that specialises in burlesque. So I think it's thinking about where you're sending your press release and who it would be, you know, who it's aimed at. Think about your target audience, and then you're more likely to aim at those who focus on that target audience.
And I know you're not commissioning the reviews, but you're doing the reviews. But if somebody makes contact with This Is Cabaret, should they follow it up? Should they keep emailing? Should they try and phone? Should they write? What's the best? Do they need to politely pester somebody there, or should they just send it in and just keep their fingers crossed? Or what's the best approach, do you think?
I mean, I think it was a few years ago when when This Is Cabaret had not long ago launched, I sent a press release for my own show to them and didn't hear anything back. So I sent it again a couple of weeks later just to check that they definitely received it. And straight away got a phone call from them saying they were going to come down and review the show. They actually hadn't received the original email. There'd been some sort of mistake. So I'm always a believer in, you've got to push to a certain extent.
I like polite persistence pays. Right? They don't want to be a pain, right, and upset people, but just politely reminding people that you're there can never be a bad thing.
That's right. I mean, I don't want to open the floodgates for everyone emailing This Is Cabaret now, but I apologise to the editor if this happens. But I always think for any aspect of a performing career, when you have to often promote yourself, if you don't do it, there's 5 other acts who are already doing it. So someone else will get the review or someone else will get the gig.
When I was putting the book together and talking to agents, actually, they were talking about the importance of a video, a show reel, the electronic press kit, the EPK, and they said that these days nothing really gets sent in the post. They said people used to send DVDs and photographs and printed press releases and so on, but nowadays everything's done by email. Is that, do you concur with that in the cabaret world? Because that was more specifically for cruise ship booking agents.
Yeah, I think in the cabaret scene it's vital to have an online presence and also to use social media like Facebook and Twitter, because I think people underestimate how powerful a tool that can be. Not just for contacting people who are interested in your show, your fans, if you like, or potential fans, but for networking with other members of the scene and finding out about stuff that's going on and opportunities you can get involved in. And as you've said, these days you're not going to stick it in the post. Somebody can, with a click of a button, they can see your show reel and make a decision about whether to book you. So all these things, they're really important.
How can people really use social media to make a difference?
I think it's something called shareable content. I'm going to sound like I really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
And my boyfriend will be laughing when he hears this because he actually specialises in social media, so he's taught me everything I know. Shareable content is going to get your name out there and get more people interested in what you do. And as you've said, I don't think shareable content is, it was a great show, woo, the audience were great, and that sort of thing, or my show's coming up, come and see it. I think it's got to be something a bit more interesting. Obviously, yes, you're going to say when your shows are and a couple of pictures of the last one. But a good example is the fantastic cabaret performer Le Gâteau Chocolat, whose Facebook posts and Twitter posts are fantastic. They're hilarious. They're not always to do with show. It's almost like an online diary. He puts funny photos. He puts pictures of his stage makeup, talks about going to the gym and funny things that have happened to him at the airport and stuff. And the way he writes it is so funny. You can see all these people clicking share, then everyone in their Facebook sees, and they think, oh, who's this crazy guy in a dress? And then immediately they're going to be interested. And I think that's the way you're spreading the word, with something a bit more interesting.
That sounds like great advice. And so it's a matter of, so it doesn't always have to be about, oh, I've got this gig and I'm fabulous and isn't this a wonderful song and I met this person and I've just seen this great show. Sometimes it's more effective if it's actually not about those things.
I think so. I mean, we've been sort of trying it out on the Two Dumb Blondes Facebook page, and we had some blonde joke competitions and people had to put their favourite blonde jokes on there. It was fantastic and gave us some great ideas for our show because, we got some really brilliant blonde jokes out of it. And we had an honorary dumb blonde of the week, and it was just all sorts of funny news stories that we found, and we had lots of people sharing it, and obviously that gets our name out there, but it's a bit more interesting, hopefully, than just...
Yeah, and it's not that people are going to see the name. They're not necessarily going to go, wow, we've got to see these people perform, but it just plants a little seed, doesn't it? And if 6 months later or a couple of years later even, they're wondering what to do that night, and your name is there on a listing amongst 20 others, they might just register, oh, I know, I've heard about these girls, right? And that's where the difference, that's where those amusing Facebook posts can turn into hard cash.
It's true. In fact, I can think of another example. Not everyone knows about Foursquare, which is a sort of social media thing, a bit like the Facebook check-in, where you say where you are, whether it's a restaurant or a cafe or a cabaret bar. But members of Foursquare can search. If they're standing in Leicester Square, they've got nothing to do for the next 3 hours, where shall I go? If they click on there, and perhaps they want to search for cabaret in their area, if that cabaret show is on Foursquare, it will come up. And we actually had that happen with my show that I run, Sunday Cabaret. We had an audience member that did that. They turned up to the show and they found out about it just from using that app, basically, spur of the moment, and then after that they came every month for quite a while. So.
Isn't that great? I think the most popular or the most effective Facebook posts I've done are where I'm asking my followers for their opinion on a very simple question: is it this or is it that? And the most successful one was, and I genuinely wanted people's help. I was couldn't decide between 2 album covers for a new album that the designer had shortlisted 2, and I couldn't make up my mind. So I just asked everybody, and is it the black one or is it the yellow one? Mm-hmm. So it was a very quick thing to ask people, very quick thing for people to answer, and it had a huge response, and it really helped to generate interest in the album once it was released months later, because and people still say to me now, oh, I'm so glad you chose the yellow one, or whatever. Yeah. And so engaging people is the trick, isn't it? I love that thing, shareable content.
Yeah, I think it shows how much things have changed in the business as well. Just it's fantastic for artists to be able to engage directly with their followers or their fans on Twitter. You can send a comment and then literally the artists themselves might reply, and I think from the sort of fans' point of view that would be exciting.
You mentioned before the cabaret community and connecting with social media with the cabaret community. There is a big community out there. What about open mics? Because I know that's somewhere where you can easily meet people. Have you found those useful for yourself? Do you see that they're useful?
I think it is a very useful thing, yes, and it's the networking, it's the just getting your name there, and I think as we talked about show reels before, it is a good way for bookers to see what you do, but sometimes even that's not enough, and bookers often prefer to see you actually in person. So for their point of view, the open mic is a great way for them to quickly have an idea of what's going on with your act and whether you're suitable for their venue, or maybe someone in the audience is kind of scouting around as well.
And great for us as performers just to practice new material. We're both experienced at what we do, but sometimes I'll go to an open mic because there's nothing like performing a song in front of a real audience. I can learn a new song, I can practice it with my pianist, think, okay, I'm all ready to go. But once I've performed it once or twice in front of a real audience and got a reaction, it really builds my confidence so that I can, once I'm doing it in a really important place where it really counts because people are paying money, they've given up their evening just to listen to me do what I do, it gives me a lot more confidence. Yeah,
I really think so. I mean, we always used to do that, going back to the classical training. I always felt that when I'd learnt a new song, added it to my repertoire, it wasn't really in until I've performed it somewhere. And I would never ever have go to auditions and sing a song that I haven't done in a concert, whatever that concert may be, even if it's an informal concert somewhere, like one of those free lunchtime concerts they do in churches. I always wanted to try out the material first. So it's the same thing, and it's really useful.
As a reviewer and seeing the cabaret scene as it's developing, because everybody tells me that there is a resurgence in cabaret at the moment, do you feel that, and what do you think about the future for cabaret?
There's a new London Cabaret Festival being launched, and I went to the launch night this week. Some fantastic artists there. The room was absolutely packed, and such a diverse range of talent, all sorts of absolutely crazy acts like the lip syncers, who are really very interesting, very left field. And as Matt Ricardo was one of the announcers, one of the MCs, and he sort of said, it's cabaret when you stand there saying, what the F was that? And I think these things are truly exciting, and I really use that word sort of hand on heart, saying, I really believe this, and it's starting to get a reputation now in London.
Suddenly it seems that more of the public are interested in it. Why?
There's an interesting fashion for vintage things and something a bit different. I think sometimes a member of the public might go to something and because they really want to be seen at that place, and it's something part of the way they see themselves. They want to do something that's really interesting and different. And those are the kind of people I always want to get to our shows, because you tend to meet more interesting people, and it's just, the whole thing's more creative. I think people are looking for something that's a little bit different.
Long may it continue.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this Cabaret Secrets podcast. If you've got any comments or questions, please visit cabaretsecrets.com, where you'll also find details of the Cabaret Secrets book, an indispensable guide on how to create your own show, travel the world, and get paid to do what you love.